Hello there. Another fine Montana day. Thanks for revisiting the electric bison. Today I'm standing in front of Montana's state capitol building. It was paid for with a $350,000 donation by an Irish American who could not read or write, but he discovered a fabulous amount of gold in a little town north of here called Marysville, and he named the mine after his parish back in Ireland, the Drumlummon. In front of the Capitol is the statue of Thomas Francis Marr, who was the commander of the famous Irish Brigade during the Civil War, and came to Montana by way of that, but before that he was quite a leader in New York City after returning from Tasmania, where he had been transported by the British government instead of being drawn and quartered as his sentence first required. What he had done is he had parted ways with O'Connell. I've mentioned Daniel O'Connell, Ireland's liberator, who pursued nonviolence. But Thomas Marr and some of his friends, who became the Young Irelanders, they said, "No, we've had enough of this. This famine is no good, and we've seen what's going on over there in Ireland, in France, and it's time for us to take the sword." So he was called Marr the Sword. So he's on his horse waving a sword. But he was quite a remarkable leader. Perhaps we'll get a chance to talk about him some other time. But the thing about Marr and Daniel O'Connell is that O'Connell exerted a huge influence over the Irish people. And for the Irishmen who were marching south to begin that war with Mexico at the behest of President James Polk and other slave owners, people that wanted to wrap Texas up as a slave state and then get the states on the other side of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, parts of Utah, make them slave states. And some of the Irishmen that were marching toward the Rio Grande to precipitate this kind of a conflict for this purpose started to think differently about whether they should be in the American Army. A number of American Army officers wrote home and said, "It's real obvious we're going down here to do this, and I question whether it's a good reason to have a war to expand slavery." The country was just then getting split up between those who wanted to keep slavery and those who felt it was not a good thing. Well, one of the things that's not often mentioned about this march down to the Rio Grande is that the Irish soldiers that were marching had to be thinking about what Daniel O'Connell had written to the people in Cincinnati, to his supporters in Cincinnati, Ohio, 3 years earlier, 1843. He had written a very long letter castigating the Irishmen in this country that would stoop so low as to own another human being. He said that was shameful. And he wrote a really long letter. And he basically said, don't do that. It's beneath you as an Irish person. And it was a very good set of arguments. It might sway some of the MAGA people today. But it had to be on the minds of the Irish soldiers who were formed in their youth by Daniel O'Connell, that slavery wasn't a good thing. And to my way of thinking, some of them decided it was time to cut bait. I remember during the Vietnam War, I really had trouble with that war. But I was in the military. I had gotten my commission from ROTC, and I struggled along with a lot of other people, with what to do. Should we go over there and do that to those people, or should I get out? Should I, go to Canada? And what I had decided to do was just wait and take it one step at a time. And in my case, I was real fortunate. I never got orders for Vietnam. I ended up down at Fort Bragg, and I worked in an intelligence shop down there, and I came out of it okay, because I felt like our country needs our military, right? Not unpatriotic. Well, a lot of those same feelings had to be going through the minds of the Irish soldiers. You know, what am I doing here with these clowns that want to keep slavery? It's not my thing. Yet they wanted to be Americans, and they were working in that direction. So, and it's not the first time Irishmen would have to fight each other. I mean, 1/3 of the British army under Wellington at Waterloo that defeated Bonaparte, 1/3 were Irish soldiers. And then you had the Irish Legion on the other side fighting for Bonaparte. So, to my way of thinking, that's the kind of stuff that they were thinking about. And so what happened is around the 29th of March, they came upon an arroyo, or a big gully with some water, slow water in it, called the Colorado. It wasn't the Colorado River, but it was called the Colorado Arroyo. And they had to cross that to get farther down to the Rio Grande. And so there was a heavy chaparral brush on the other side. It was a deep arroyo. You had to go down 30 feet, across water that was 4 feet deep, then go up the other side, a steep embankment. And you couldn't see what was on the other side. But you could hear that it seemed like lots of Mexicans, and they were blowing bugles and making all kinds of noises in the chaparral. And one of them said in perfect English, "If you come across here, we got a war going. You're dead ducks." Made it real clear. It's kind of like presenting us with the option to see what we would do. And so General Taylor, he arrayed his force so they had a regiment go down into the arroyo in 4 columns. He put his artillery behind it on the embankment overlooking, and then he set his other regiments off to the side to come in and reinforce. And so the people going across that water in those first 4 columns didn't know if they were going to get shot or not. They couldn't see what was in the chaparral. Well, they finally got up to the other side, and the Mexicans had taken off. It turned out to be just kind of a reconnaissance with noise. And but what had to be obvious then to the soldiers is that this thing is going to get serious. And because they were sweating, going into a fight right there. And I think that had to be when people like Riley and other Irish people and Germans, so forth, immigrants, started really thinking seriously about what side do I want to be on.